This tutorial is an introduction to 3D modeling in Blender. It's just one of many ways to model, and it's taking the approach of using planes and a single face and expanding outwards from there using loop cuts and using extruding. So I'm going to start by bringing an image into Blender, but first I'm going to look at my viewport from an orthographic view from the Y perspective. And I already have a model ready, so I'll just go to here and my Mario Rigify test, and then in there I've got Mario turnarounds just to stay on theme. And I'm going to press Alt G when I've got this selected just to take it back to the center in case it's flown off as it just did there for me. Now I'd like to be able to see this guide drawing from the front and side separately. And what I mean by that is when I look at it from the y-axis I'd like to see the front, and then when I look at it from the x-axis I'd like to see the side, like that. So I'm going to have two of these planes crossing over one another. When you drag a reference image like that into Blender, it gets dropped in as a reference image like this. So this isn't a plane or anything that you can edit too much. It just appears here in the collections and in the scenes as this single image, which doesn't show up in renders and can just be deleted or turned on and turned off with hide. So I'll start by taking the reference image that I've just brought in, and I'll hold Shift and press D to duplicate that reference. I'll just put it there, and I'm going to press R and 90 degrees to begin rotating this, and I'm going to press Z just to lock it to the Z axis. Now that that's been locked like that, I can see Mario here from the front facing that way. I'm just going to press G and X to lock it to the X axis, and I'm going to try to put Mario perfectly down this center line that you can see here. So that's him there, and now I'm going to go to this side of the x-axis, and I'm going to try to line the side image up with that. So if I move it around like this and press Y, I can lock it to the y-axis, and I'm going to look at his head as being the thing that I'm centering rather than his body. So with G and Y, I think I'll just say the center of the head is roughly there. And what you're trying to do is make it so that if you look from the front, you see this image. If you look from the side, you see that. And the two are really closely aligned. Now this should all happen within the drawing, the design drawing that you've made. So when you're doing your turnaround drawings for your character, you want to make sure that the top of the head, you see this here? You want to make sure that those top lines line up perfectly in height, and that various things such as the bottom of the feet and the fists and the shoulders and the neck and everything line up as close as possible, so that when you are moving around like this in Blender, everything lines up. And this one looks like it's pretty much spot on. You can see the bottom line there is a pretty good reference. Right, I think I'm ready to model. Right, so sometimes when you're working in 3D you can accidentally click on your reference images as you're trying to click on your geometry instead. So to prevent that from happening, I'm just going to drag a box over both of these and press M for move to collection, and I'm going to click new collection, and I'm going to call it refs, and then just hit enter twice, and now I've got my reference images in a collection called refs. But that's not really going to help because I'm still going to be able to click on them. So I need to lock the refs collection so that it's impossible to select these by mistake. To do that, you come up here to this filter option and you turn this on here, which is the selectable or not selectable toggle. Give it a click and it'll turn blue, and that means that in the view layer, the view layer display window, you can now click on this. So when it's solid like that, things in that collection are selectable. But if you set this to this, when you try and click on these, it's not going to select anymore. So that is the selectability toggle. Very handy. Right, now that that's done, I'm going to create my first plane. Oh, actually before I do that, I'm just going to knock the opacity down on these two reference images because I don't actually want them to be completely solid like that, because if they are, when I create a plane like this, I'm going to struggle to see it because of the opacity of these reference images. So I'll turn the selectability toggle back on so that I can select these. I'm going to click on I'll click on this one first and come over here to my toolbox. Now down here, second from the bottom, you can select this red image and it brings up the properties of the reference image that you have. So you've got things like size and offset, but what you're looking for is opacity, which is here. Give it a tick, and then I just put this on 0.5 like that to make this semi-opaque. It's a slider, so you can just do that and get it to, the way you want it, whatever works best for your reference image. And I'll do the same with this one as well. I'll turn on opacity and put 0.5, and now I have semi-transparent reference images. Right, so I'll just select that again, and I've already made a plane, but I think what I'll do is just get rid of this plane. What's happened is I've had this collection selected when I created my plane, so my plane has been put into that collection. I don't want it in there, so I'm actually going to delete this, but if I wanted to get this out, I can just drag it out like that and it will come out into the main area. I am going to delete it just so that I can start clean. Right, so Shift A and we'll make a plane, and the plane is currently selected, you just can't see it. Done it again, it's in the refs collection again. Drag that back out. So yes, it's here and it's currently selected. Now rule number 1 is do not start moving this, rotating this, or scaling this as an object. It's the best practice is to just leave the transforms of this object box alone and work instead on the mesh in edit mode. So I'll go into edit mode like that, and I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees on the x-axis here so that the plane is facing me. So R for rotate, and then I'm going to type 90, and what's happened is it's rotated, but it's rotated on the y-axis. So I'm going to press X, and now it's rotated on the x-axis. Wonderful. I'll just show you that again in perspective mode. So R, 90, and X. I could have pressed Z, I could have pressed Y, but I'm going with the x-axis like that. Enter when you're finished, and we're good to go. Now I can't see my reference images behind this plane because it's on opaque mode, and I need to turn on X-ray like this. So if I do that, now I can see through. Excellent, right. So the type of model we're going to make is a disjointed model where the body and the arms and the head are all separate. And it's worth saying I'm not going to model Mario right now because that will take hours and hours, and I probably wouldn't do a very good job anyway. I'm just going to model the body and probably a leg. I might do some arms as well, just depending on how long this video is getting. So I'm in edit mode at the moment, and I'm going to start by grabbing these top vertex points here, and I'm going to bring them down to the shoulder. I don't really want to fall too far off track, so I'm going to press Z to lock the movement axis to the Z axis. I'll take it to where the neck roughly ends, which is there, and I'll press S for scale and just scale this in. Not bad. It's looking like my reference image isn't quite center because I've just scaled that in there, and you can see that over here there's a gap between that point and the shoulder, but over here it's pretty spot on. So I'm going to actually shift the reference images slightly to the left. So I'll come out of here, I'll come back to the refs and toggle them back on. I'll select the side one, and then I'll shift select the front one, press G, and on the x-axis I'm just going to move it like that. And I'm going to just try and line up the shoulders with the geometry points on this plane. That looks pretty close. Right, press toggle again on selectability so that refs are not selectable on the collection, not the individual planes. Right, now I'll grab the bottom points here and scale those in, and on the z-axis I'll just move them up, and I think his hips can probably end there. That looks close enough. It's still not exact, but it's pretty close. Right, excellent. So I've got a plane now that pretty much covers his body. His body is slightly wider the further down it goes, so I'm going to need to add a loop cut here. So I'll select the loop cut tool, click and drag, and just find where this needs to be. So I think I'll put it there, and I'll press S to scale this up. There we are. Fab. Right, that's perfect. That's a good place to start with the body. So I'm going to come out of object mode now, and I'm going to extrude this now so that it has a thickness basically, and I'm going to do that from the side view so that I can see this plane at the back of Mario and extrude it forward to the front of his chest. So again, I won't move this in object mode. I'll go back into edit mode, press A to select all these points, and take this backwards. I'm going to lock myself to the Y-axis so that I don't move myself too far off track. So press the Y key, and I'll take that back to, I think I'll go to there where the top of the leg here. Yeah, I think that's probably fine. And I'm now going, with everything selected, I'm going to press E for extrude to pull this out like that. Now extrude mode tends to have everything locked to a certain axis anyway by default, so you don't need to worry about remembering to press Z before you do that. But what you should do is extrude from the side view so that you can see orthographically how far you're going. So E, out it comes, and I'll take it all the way to the edge of his stomach. And that's good. I'm going to select these points here now, and on the Y-axis just bring that back so that it meets the chest. And then here I'm going to bring that back so that it gets roughly to the top of the leg. So there we are. There's Mario's body piece. Now let me just have a look at this at the back. Maybe I could pull that back slightly like that on the Y-axis. Yeah, that looks fine. I think I'll just take this piece here and take that back slightly as well so it's there. Great. Yeah, looking good. Right, so at this point I'm just going to turn the references off and look at this as a piece of geometry. Great. And I'm going to add my armature nice and early so that I can check this as I go along and see how well this is working. So from the front orthographic view, I'm going to press Shift A and go to armatures, and I'm going to add a single bone. Now that single bone's come up here, and as tempting as it will be to move this around in object mode, remember, stick to moving things around in edit mode and keeping your objects zeroed. So into edit mode we go, press A, grab this, press Z, and I'm going to bring the tail, which is this part here, I'm going to bring the tailbone down to the base. So I'll put it about there, because that's roughly going to be his hip position. Now this is the stem of his neck, so I'll press G and Z, and I'll bring the stem of his neck to there. Wonderful. Okay, now I'm going to click on this, right click and press subdivide. That's going to put a joint right in the middle of this spine. Now down here a temporary menu will pop up that will say how many divides do you want, and for a spine I think I'll go with 2, like that, because then I've got one there and I've got one there, and that looks pretty good to me. Right, let's see. I think I'll probably nudge this back slightly so that the spine is actually in line with the base of his legs. So again, in edit mode, press A to select everything, G, and then lock to the Y-axis, and I'll just bring that back to there. Excellent. And I'm now going to immediately bind this piece of geometry to this armature. And remember, you select the child first and then shift select the armature second. So Control P, and armature deform is what you want, but with automatic weights. Great. Let's have a look and see how well this is moving. I'll go into pose mode, select these. I'm going to put my pivots onto individual origins, and I'll just bend this forward. And that's the kind of deform I'm getting from this. Right, very interesting. So this is going to need some paint weighting to make this work better. What I will say though is I don't want to keep on coming into pose mode every time I want to make, every time I want to check to see how well this is deforming. So I think at frame 20 I'll key this, I'll press A and just key everything here. Location scale customs, and at frame 1 I'm going to hold Alt and press R and just take it all back to its default position. Press I and put location rotation scale here. Now I've got an animation of that, which is great because I can come out of pose mode now and make some skin weighting changes. I think also on frame 20 I'm just going to hold Control and press End with my cursor in the timeline, and that'll just crop this view. Wonderful. If you're wondering how to maximize the view on those frames, just press A for all and then press the full stop on the numpad, and in we go. Right, okay, so first thing for me is going to be telling these bottom points, these ones here, that they need to follow the bottom of this spine. But I'm going to have to label this armature properly so that I know what these different bits are called. So this first one here, I think I'll call it spine base. So select the joint and press F2 to rename. Spine base. I could have also called it spine 001. I'll call this one spine 001. And then the one up here, I'll call it, you guessed it, spine 002. Now, did I put any kind of underscore on that first one? Yes, I did, but then I didn't on the second one. So I'm just going to double click on that and put an underscore. There we go. Bit of consistency always helps. Right, let's see now. So, in edit mode for this object, I'm now going to select the vertex points and manually assign them to the different parts of that armature that I've made. Now, something that's quite annoying is that when you're in this mode you can't see the deformation of your model. But if you come over here to modify properties, over in this part of the modifier menu, on the particular modifier called armature, which appeared when you parented this geometry to that armature, you've got this option here, which is edit mode, display your modifier in edit mode. If you give that a click, it will show you, as well as being able to see your model when it's in its default position, you can also see a visual representation of it deforming, which is very helpful because I want to be able to see what's happening in real time as I make changes. So I'm going to basically come to the object data properties here, select spine base, and assign the vertex points that I've got selected to spine base, this bottom bone. So I'll click assign and they'll stick to that, but I need to remove them from the other ones. So I'll remove it from there and I'll remove it from there, and now it's 100% stuck to the bottom bone, which is perfect. Now I want to do the same to this top bone as well. So I'm going to grab these top vertex points, and over here in the vertex group I'm going to click on spine 002, which I already have selected, and I'm going to hit assign. But then I'm going to come to the other ones and hit remove, and then on this one too, hit remove. And now that's all stuck to the top and that's all stuck to the bottom, and then this one in the middle is kind of half and half. So that's going to require a bit of paint weighting to get that right. Or I could just simply say stick to spine 02. I'll have a look at that and just see how that looks. Might be good, might be bad. So remove from there and remove from there, but stick to this one. Yeah, it looks okay actually, doesn't it? That's probably the best way to go. I'll just do that. Now I could have done all of this in paint weight mode instead. And I'll just show you what paint weight mode looks like. When you've got your object selected, you can come up here to weight paint, click on that, and what you'll see is visual representations of the weights that you've just been changing. And when you have different bones selected in vertex groups, the different paint weight values show up here visually. So for spine base, if I have my paintbrush on, I can start painting the spine base onto the different vertex points of the model, like that. And as you can see here, that's causing those vertex points to have more influence from the bone that I called spine base. Quick note, you need to, when you're doing paint weighting, you need to actually paint the vertex points. So if you try to paint here in the middle, like I am now, nothing's going to happen because there's no paint weights there. Sorry, there's no vertex point there. But here at the point, at the edge, at the corner, shall I say, there is a vertex point. So when you click on it, it will receive the paint data. So that's how that works. I probably will put a little bit of a smooth on number 1, spine 001 here. So I'll come to weights, click on smooth, and that's quite a lot, but maybe I'll just turn the factor down a bit so it's not quite so extreme. But also it's happening to the deform bones, and I should have said active group instead because I think that'll be a bit more effective. So I'll come to number 1, weights, smooth, but I'll say to it just to the active just to the active group, and that'll just help to share the weights out a bit more evenly like that. Now this is a very low poly model, as you can see, and I'm going to come to my show overlays here, and I'm going to turn on geometry wireframe mode just so we can see that wireframe mode a lot better. This is very PlayStation 1, Nintendo 64 looking, and that's because back then they didn't have the memory power in their machines to handle subdivision, but we do. So I'm going to actually add a subdiv modifier to this, and that can be found here in the modifiers tab. If you go to add modifier, you can find subdivision surface here. Give that a click and it will add a bunch of temporary subdivision to the model that you've made, and you can see that here. That's here, this modifier. If you click on this here, real-time display modifier in viewport, you can turn that on and off, and that will enable and disable the modifier. You can also just get rid of the modifier with X, or just put that back on. You can apply the modifier by clicking here and clicking on apply, or Control A, like that, and that just adds the actual subdivides that you had to the mesh, so they become permanent. So in this case that's actually pretty good, but I think I'll do some tweaks first before I apply the modifier. So I'm going to turn my reference images back on now, like that, and I'm going to take this back to number 1, and I'm going to come into edit mode. And when I come into edit mode, I get my original low poly cage back, and I can modify the cage. I'll see the subdivision mesh in the middle moving around, and then when I'm finished at the end, I'll apply the modifier. So I'm going to take this one first. I'm going to put the butterfly on, and because everything is symmetrical, because I've kept everything symmetrical so far, everything should just move nicely. I won't have to do both sides. So I think I'll put that there. This one here, I'll just drag it out there so it's a bit fatter there. And then this one here, I'll probably just bring it down to there like that. Looking good. Let's have a look from the side. Just pull that out a bit like that. Take that back there a bit like that. This one to there. And take that one to there. Look, it's filling up the shape now pretty nicely. I could do with another point, to be honest, so I think I'll come to the loop cut tool here and just add another point like that, and it'll just give me a bit more flexibility. So if I put that there, it's had an impact now on the position of all the other points, so I'll just need to modify them slightly so that they work. But yeah, I think that looks okay. Put that there, perhaps move that up a bit. And you know, you could perfect this for a while, but I don't think I will. I think I'll leave it at that. Perhaps just take that in a bit, as well. Move it down, move it up, not sure. Let's just say that. That'll do. Right, got a pretty good shape there now. I'll turn the refs off again just so I can see that shape. And because I applied my paint weights nice and early, I can test it. And a lot of the new points that I'm adding to this mesh, their weight is being calculated automatically based on the positions of the previous vertex points that I had in here, the top, middle and bottom. It just means that you can keep an eye on your rig as you go along, rather than modeling everything for days and then coming in to build a rig at the end and finding that your mesh isn't very friendly with your rig at all. So yeah, I think that looks good. I'm perfectly happy with that. Now I can just come over here to my modifiers, drop the menu and press apply, and I'll have this new mesh now which has a little bit more detail to it. I don't have to though, and there's no reason to. Perhaps, I mean, if you look at this actually, my skim weighting has arguably gotten a little bit worse since doing that. So, unless there's a good reason to, just leave the modifier on for now. It should show up in render, well it will show up in render. It may become problematic when it's a higher density, when the mesh is like a higher density. Sometimes that can slow your machine down, having an active modifier like this over the top of an armature modifier. But deal with that when it comes. Just, if need be, you can always turn it off like that and then turn it back on at the very end, or if you are feeling confident, just Control A or click apply. Right, so that's Mario's body done. I'll rush through one of his legs now and then duplicate it over, and then we'll just call it a day at that. So I'll turn the modifiers back on, and I'm going to go to Shift A and make a new mesh, a plane. I'm going to go to edit mode, press A so I've got all the points selected, R for rotate 90 degrees on the X axis. I'm now going to move that down. I'm in edit mode so I'm all good, and I'll put these points here. Just make that slightly bigger, grab these points here, and on the Z axis I'll bring that down to there. Great. From the side I'm going to grab all these points with A, hit G, and I'm going to move this back on the Y axis so that this is roughly in the same place as the bottom of his leg. You see it there? I'm going to press E now and press Y and just scale, extrude that forward. Great. I'm going to take the top of his leg now, press G and Y and just move that forward as well so that it's in line with the model that I'm working from, with the reference, sorry, that I'm working from. And it looks like his legs might ever so slightly taper, so I'm just going to move that out a bit like that so that it follows it, and I'll move it in a bit there as well. I've got, yes, I'll take this one as well and move that inwards slightly, and yeah, I think that's pretty good. Yeah, it's pretty good. Fab. So I'll move on from there, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put an armature in here nice and early so that you can see why it's important to add the right geometry around the mesh that you've made. So I'm going to turn the refs off again. Let's look at this. Very nice. And I'm going to go Control A, armature. Now I could build from this. I could just come into edit mode, press Shift A, add a new bone and put it down here, and it'll all be part of the same armature, but it'll just make things a little bit more complicated when I'm trying to test things, because the bones that are up here as part of the body will automatically weigh themselves in on the leg that is down here, and that can be a good thing because there'll be certain things I want to, you know, have influence over this, but for the sake of testing and just keeping things simple, I'll use a separate armature. So I'm going to come out of here, Shift A, armature, single bone. I'm not going to move this in object mode. I'm going to go into edit, press A and just move that down. Now this is facing the wrong way, and you know, you could do like some form of switch direction on it just so that it turns around, or you can press R and 180 degrees it on the Y-axis. Whatever's easiest is fine. So I'll just take that up here, and I'll say the top of the leg starts there. I'll take the head of the joint, press G, lock it to the Z-axis, bring it up there. Whoops. Right, I'm going to have a look from this side now. Click on this, G, and just move it back slightly. And treat the top of this like the socket part of the leg joint. I'll just take that one there and put it here. Right, now I'm going to need a bend in this, so I'm going to click on that, right click and subdivide, and now I've got a knee in the middle. And I'll probably just nudge that forward a bit like that, just so that my IK controls later on work properly. Okay, excellent. Come out of there, go into pose mode, have a look at this. Yep, that's pretty much what I wanted. It might have been a bit lower on the reference images actually, let me have a look. Not really, no, I think it's okay. Yeah, it's fine. Turn off refs. Right, back to object mode. Child first, armature second. Control P, automatic weights. Right, grab this, come into pose mode, rotate this, and look what happens. So this is demonstrating the importance of having good topology, having accommodating topology that works around a rig's needs instead of against it. Because unfortunately, making something look good as a model is not enough. It's got to function as well. So I think at frame 20 here, I'll just key this in position. And then at frame 1, I'll press Alt-R and zero that out, and then put a key there as well. So now my knee is bending like that. And with it like that, I'm going to now add edge loops. Sorry, I'm going to use the loop cut tool to add edge loops to this leg bone. This leg geometry. So I'll come out of here, click on the geometry, and go to edit mode. Now I can't see the bend in the geometry, and that's because over here, under the armature tab, which is under modifiers, I need to have this toggled on. And now I can see. So, loop cut, where are you? There. I'm going to place a loop cut roughly there. And you see how it's added the geometry now that Mario's leg needed to bend. And now we have a functioning leg that is actually bending properly. Wonderful. Now I'm going to add a bit more geometry just to accommodate this and give us a better, some better deformation. So edit mode, loop cut tool. I'm going to put that roughly there and just play around and have a look at the way this is bending in your display. Not bad. Maybe I'll put that one there. Now I know this bit here is curling in on itself, but I can wait paint that back out again. But yeah, that looks pretty good. And if I turn off this mode, then this X-ray mode, sorry, then yeah, I can see things don't look too, yeah, things are moving pretty well. So I'm going to add my subdivide modifier to this piece of geometry now to smooth it all out so I can see how things are looking. So add modifier, subdivision surface, and there we go. That's how that's looking. Excellent. So if you're wondering how do you make the bottom of a mesh, like here, look flat, you simply want to have an edge loop which is going very close to the edge of the model. And what I mean by that is with the loop cut tool, simply bring it to here and add a loop here which comes very close to the bottom of the model. And if you can see with the subdivision mesh, which is currently on preview, that's causing that bottom bit to flatten out. So if I put that there and come back to object mode, you can see I've got a flat part of the geometry now. And yeah, I think that's rotating pretty well now. So I'll leave it at that. Those are the basics. You can probably fill the rest in by yourself. You would add your arms, your heads, and your feet and your hands. And of course the other leg, which you might be tempted to just simply copy that over there like that. Needless to say, you wouldn't be rigging manually like this. You would wind up using Rigify. So by the time you finished modeling this whole thing, you'd probably delete these armatures and set up a Rigify rig. But because you've been checking your topology as you've gone along, you'll be safe in the knowledge that your rig is going to fit to the Rigify rig nicely, and you'll get some nice automatic weights over the top of that. I recommend having a good look at skin weighting because that's crucial here. But otherwise, the only other thing I'd add to this is that usually topology, particularly for a reference image like the one we've been working from, Usually these things would be extruded from the main mesh of the body. So I'll just show you what that looks like. If we pretend these legs weren't created, what you might expect, let's go with, yeah, let's just go with an arm for now. This won't look very good because I haven't set the geometry up ready for this. But if I put a loop cut here like that, that just adds that detail for Mario's body. And then what it gives me is two, I'll just turn this subdivision mesh off for a second so you can see. It gives me two faces at the bottom here for the legs to come out of, and then it gives me two arms here which I can pull the arms out of as well. Now what do I mean by pull out? I mean take the face, go into face mode, sorry, click on this face and literally use the extrude tool to pull a face out. So press E and voila, there we go, an arm is coming out. I'd probably do that from this from this kind of direction instead. Now look at that, that's basically the mirror modifier not working too well. Turn that off. And yeah, I'll take it out like that, probably take it to about there. And then likewise on the other side. We can press E and X and just pull that out like that. Wonderful, let's see. Looks kind of weird from above. But you would probably try to make a better mesh for this to come from in the first place. I'll just do the same with the bottom part, that one there. E, Z, and well, let me look at this from an orthographic view actually. So pull that down, lock it to the Z-axis and take it to there. Likewise with that one there. Just E, G and Z to lock it. Whoops, I think I messed that up. Yeah, there we go. Let's try that again. G and Z axis, lock it to there and bring it down. And excellent. Reapply my subdivision and you can see where this is going. It would take a lot more finessing. You'd put the right loop cut tool bits in the right places like that just to try and make this a bit more of a shaped mesh that works. And then of course we saw earlier that our model was quite far from ideal when it came to the thickness from above. Perhaps you pull that to about there and then probably the same on the other side. And of course you can do this all from one side and then mirror over at the very end, but that's not the way I'd set this particular thing up. Right, so yeah, that's probably more like what you'd expect to see in a studio, but I would actually recommend breaking everything down and having separate pieces for arms and legs and bodies when you're first getting started, just because it's easier to manage skin weighting. Skin weighting and vertex groups can get quite convoluted quite quickly, and save yourself the headache and instead just make it easier to learn by using separate pieces for the body parts. Right, good luck.